DDT is one of the most controversial chemicals in the world. It is a powerful insecticide, most famous for its use against the mosquitoes that spread malaria. Today, DDT use is increasingly being revived around the world, but there has been pressure to ban it under the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants, and the World Health Organization recently announced a program to phase out the use of DDT in favour of other techniques. It is true that malaria will not be eliminated by spraying with DDT or other pesticides alone. Anti-malarial drugs will be important, and ultimately the answer may well be a vaccine. Fortunately, after many years of work, there is a vaccine in advanced clinical trials. But stopping mosquito bites will also be critical. Insecticide-treated bed nets are widely seen as one of the most effective methods. However, they are inconvenient and only a partial solution. The main reason they get so much attention is that they are cheap. Less often mentioned is that even housing improvements as simple as an iron sheet roof instead of straw, or a plywood ceiling or proper windows, have been shown to reduce the number of bites. Indoor spraying with insecticides does cost slightly more than bed nets, although not as much as proper housing. And for some opponents of DDT, that's enough to damn its use. In fact, indoor spraying is highly effective, and it deserves to be well resourced. While a few other insecticides are available, DDT has an edge for indoor spraying in that it is long-lasting. Spraying with DDT will serve for 6 months as against 3 or 4 with the alternatives. But the most important reason that DDT still needs to be used is that mosquitoes can evolve resistance to insecticides. Critics of DDT point out that widespread DDT spraying in the malaria elimination campaign of 1955 to 69, many mosquitoes evolved resistance to DDT. That's true, but they've also evolved resistance to alternative pesticides. And an important part of new campaigns against malaria is to test mosquitoes for resistance and monitor when resistance is emerging, so that the appropriate insecticide can be used, and when resistance emerges, an alternative can quickly be deployed to stop the problem spreading out of control. This strategy needs access to the widest variety of insecticide possible. In fact, we do not have enough insecticides as it is, and there's an urgent need to develop more. In these circumstances, it would be crazy to throw out one of the best alternatives that we do have, DDT. So why is DDT so controversial? The answer is that it represents something much bigger than just another insecticide. The campaign against DDT goes back to 1962, when Rachel Carson published her book entitled Silent Spring. The most worrying effects that Carson highlighted in Silent Spring were acute poisoning and the possibility that in the long term DDT could cause cancer. But for an insecticide, DDT is not particularly toxic, even if you eat it. There are few reports of DDT poisoning even among workers, and there is no good evidence that DDT causes cancer in people. Carson wrote in 1962 that because cancer takes time to develop, insufficient time has elapsed to reveal the full effect of the new insecticides, and that the full maturing of whatever seeds of malignancy have been sown by these chemicals is yet to come. In this she sounded very like today's environmentalists, who warn that we should act in a cautious way to avoid the unknowns of a dark future. Yet now we know that DDT does not cause cancer. But even more fundamentally, Carson's book brought together much of the worldview of today's environmentalism for the first time. There is some evidence that high levels of DDT may cause effects such as premature births, but such effects are small and unclear, especially in relation to the large and certain benefits of fighting malaria. Overall, the catastrophe that Carson envisaged has not been realised. Some of her observations were correct, and she was also right that technology can be misused. She points out that pesticides were a result of military research into nerve gases, and that DDT was first widely used by the US military at the end of the Second World War. It is true that there's nothing to celebrate in waging war, but Carson made the mistake of seeing those origins as tainting technology as a whole. This argument that technology is inherently abusive is a founding one for modern environmentalism. For a while, the working title of Silent Spring was Man Against the Earth. In the opening to the book, she quotes E.B. White's lines, "I am pessimistic about the human race because it is too ingenious for its own good, and that we should view the planet appreciatively instead of dictatorially." The objection to Carson is that when people modify the Earth, they do so to improve it for human beings, not to destroy it, and that ingenuity will be our salvation rather than our downfall. Arguments about DDT often seem to be exaggerated on both sides because they are really about something bigger, the intellectual legacy of Rachel Carson. We should be enthusiastic about ingenuity helping us to eradicate malaria using insecticides, medicines and other tools. Then we can chill out about using DDT.